My best friend's wife asked me to babysit. She wasn't my friend anymore. When I first saw her name flash across my phone that night, I didn't hesitate. It was Nora. And when Nora called, I always answered. If only I had known that answering that call would be the moment everything in my life, every definition of friendship, loyalty, and trust began to unravel. Nora and Daniel had been my people for nearly a decade. We met at a small community volunteering event. I was organizing a book drive. Daniel was lugging heavy boxes with that easy smile of his, and Nora, then his fiancée, had come to bring him coffee. The three of us clicked immediately. Back then, I used to think of them as the kind of couple everyone wished they could be: playful, stable, in sync. They bickered like siblings and made up like lovers in a romantic film. They became my family in ways I never expected. When they married, I was the maid of honor. When they had their first baby, little Grace, I was the godmother. And when life got messy, the long nights, the postpartum exhaustion, the stress, I was their constant. The one they called at 2 a.m. when the baby wouldn't stop crying, or when Daniel's work trips took him away for weeks. I never minded. I loved Grace like my own niece. I loved Nora even more. She was the sister I never had: fierce, funny, complicated, the kind of woman who could make you laugh and cry in the same breath. So when she started asking me to babysit more often, I thought nothing of it. At first, it was once every few weeks, then twice. Then it became almost routine. Could you watch Grace tonight? Daniel's got another work dinner, she'd say, her voice tired but grateful. Of course, I'd reply, slipping into my sneakers before the call even ended. I told myself it was what friends did. We helped each other. We showed up. But somewhere, deep down, something small and uneasy began to stir, a faint tremor that I ignored because I trusted her. I trusted both of them. Their home always smelled of cinnamon and baby powder, the kind of smell that clung to the curtains and the couch and made you feel safe. Grace's giggles filled the halls, and the hum of Nora's lullabies would float from the nursery as I rocked the baby to sleep. But every time I walked through that front door, something new seemed off. First, it was the way Nora started dressing up more for Daniel's business trips. He'd be gone for the week, and she'd show up in full makeup to run errands. Then it was the text messages, quick flashes of her phone lighting up, her sudden smiles, the way she'd turn her screen face down. Still, I dismissed it. Maybe she was just feeling good about herself. Maybe she needed a break from the exhaustion of motherhood. I told myself I was overthinking, projecting. Even after all, I was single and spent more time at their place than in my own apartment. Then one night, something happened that I couldn't shake. It was late. Past 11 p.m. Nora had called asking if I could come by. Daniel was out of town again, and she needed a few hours to clear her head. She sounded on edge, voice tight. When I arrived, she looked radiant, glowing, almost her hair curled, perfume strong enough to fill the entryway. Going somewhere? I joked, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled too quickly. Just meeting a friend. I won't be long. That was it. No details. No names. Just that. She handed me Grace, kissed her on the forehead, and slipped out the door, leaving me alone with a sleeping baby and a heart that suddenly felt heavy. I remember pacing the living room that night, trying to convince myself it was none of my business. But I couldn't shake the unease. Something about her tone, her rush, the way she avoided my eyes. I told myself not to judge,
not to pry.
but I wish I had. The weeks that followed only made things stranger. Nora started canceling plans with me, saying she was too busy, that motherhood had her swamped. But then I'd see her posts online dressed up, smiling at restaurants, wine glasses clinking under dim light, always tagged with vague captions like "me time" or "finally free." Daniel, meanwhile, seemed distracted. His usual warmth was gone. He'd text me less, cancel our catch-up coffees, saying he had too much on his plate. I chalked it up to parenthood stress, marriage strain, the kind of stuff that made people a little colder. But one evening, as I was putting Grace down for her nap, I found something that changed everything. I had gone into Nora's bedroom to grab a blanket from the dresser. That's when I noticed a men's watch sitting on the nightstand. Not Daniel's. I knew his brand, his style. This one was different. Sleeker, newer. I frowned, assuming maybe it was a friend's or a gift. But when I picked it up, my stomach dropped. On the back, engraved in delicate cursive, were the initials DH. Daniel Harris. My Daniel. My best friend. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction in my mind, every laugh, every shared meal, every inside joke. Could it be?
No.
Daniel adored Nora. He adored me, but in the way friends do. We had boundaries. We had history. But the watch, the perfume, the late night calls. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. I told myself there had to be, until the night Nora called again. She said she needed me to babysit. Daniel was away for the weekend. Something in me, call it instinct or self-preservation, told me to say no. But I said yes. Maybe because I needed to see it for myself. Maybe because deep down I already knew. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No lights on except for the soft glow from the bedroom window upstairs. I knocked softly, calling Nora's name. No answer. Then I heard it, a muffled laugh. A man's voice. My heart stopped. I stepped inside. The door unlocked. Grace's toys scattered across the living room floor. The baby monitor crackled softly. And from upstairs, a sound that didn't belong to friendship or trust or anything pure. My knees trembled. Every step up that staircase felt like walking into fire. When I reached the bedroom door, it was slightly ajar. I pushed it open just enough to see Daniel, Nora, together, and the look on their faces, shock, guilt, fear, was the moment my world collapsed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, my voice barely a whisper. How could you? Daniel jumped up first, his face pale, half-dressed, scrambling for words that didn't exist. Nora grabbed the sheet and clutched it to her chest, her eyes wide, lips trembling, but she didn't speak. For a few seconds, the room was filled only with the hum of the ceiling fan and the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I think I said his name, Daniel, as if maybe by saying it, I could make it mean something else. Maybe he'd tell me this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe I was dreaming. But he didn't say anything. He just stood there, my best friend, the man who'd called me his sister, who'd once sworn he'd always protect me, standing there with his wife, the woman I trusted most, wrapped up in betrayal. I can explain, he finally said. It was such a cliché, so pathetic that I almost laughed. Explain what, exactly? My voice came out calm, too calm. That you've been lying to me? That the woman you promised to love and the friend you promised to protect both decided to turn me into your little secret? Nora's eyes filled with tears. It's not like that. Then what is it like? I snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it's exactly like that. Daniel stepped closer, his hand half raised as if he wanted to touch me. Please, Emma, don't make this worse. That did it. Something inside me snapped. Don't make it worse? I said, my voice breaking. You made it worse the second you crossed that line. You both did. Grace's cry pierced through the silence from the nursery, a small wail that cut through the tension like a knife. For a moment, all three of us froze. Nora moved first, wrapping the sheet around herself and hurrying toward the sound. Daniel tried to speak again, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said softly. Just don't. And then I left. I remember the air outside that night. It was cold and damp, the kind of night that seeps into your bones. I stood by my car for a long time, hands shaking, staring at the house that had once felt like a second home. My mind ran in circles looking for reasons, excuses, explanations, anything to make sense of it. But there was nothing. The truth was simple and cruel. I had been betrayed by the two people I loved most. For days, I didn't answer their calls. Daniel texted endlessly, please, can we talk? And Nora left voicemails that started with apologies and ended in sobs. I deleted every one of them. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I wanted to protect Grace, that innocent little girl who had no idea what her parents had done. She didn't deserve to grow up with whispers about her mother or tension in every room. But silence has a way of eating you alive. Everywhere I went, I felt haunted by it, their voices, their laughter, our memories. The betrayal followed me like a shadow. I stopped going to church with them. I stopped visiting our favorite coffee shop. Even the park where we used to take Grace felt poisoned. Then one afternoon, about 2 weeks later, Daniel showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't open the door. But when I saw him standing there, his face drawn and tired, something in me, maybe old habit, made me let him in. He didn't waste time. I know you hate me, he said quietly. You should. I hate myself too. I crossed my arms. Then we're in agreement. He nodded. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed bitterly. That's what everyone says before it does. He looked down at his hands. Nora and I, we were falling apart. You were always there. You were easy to talk to. She felt close to you. And he trailed off. And you what? I asked, voice shaking. You decided to destroy both of us to make yourself feel better? He looked up, eyes glistening. I made a mistake. I lost control. But it didn't mean nothing, Emma. You know me. You know me. That was the problem. I thought I did. I knew a man who would never do this. I said, you're not him. He reached out, but I stepped back. Don't ever come here again. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he nodded. I'm sorry, he whispered, then turned and left. For months, I tried to piece myself back together. I threw myself into work, into volunteering, into anything that could fill the silence. But every so often, I'd see them at the grocery store,
At the park.
pretending to be the perfect couple. Once, Nora waved at me across the parking lot. I turned away before our eyes could meet. Still, I couldn't escape the ache. The anger simmered under my skin not because they'd hurt me, but because they'd carried on like nothing happened. Then came the breaking point. It was Grace's first birthday. I hadn't planned to go. I'd ignored the invitation, thinking it was a cruel joke. But when Nora's mother called and said, "Your family, Emma. Please come," I hesitated. Maybe part of me wanted closure. Maybe I wanted them to see what they'd done to me. So I went. The backyard was full of balloons and laughter, a picture-perfect day. Nora greeted guests with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Daniel hovered near the grill, acting like the doting husband. When they saw me, the laughter dimmed. "Emma," Nora breathed, clutching her daughter closer. I nodded politely, forcing a smile. "Happy birthday, Grace." Daniel stepped forward. "I'm glad you came." "Don't be," I said softly. "I didn't come for you." I turned my attention to Grace, that sweet, innocent child giggling in her mother's arms, and my chest tightened. She deserved better than this web of lies. I stayed for 20 minutes. I smiled for the baby, took a photo, and then I left. It should have ended there. But sometimes life has a cruel sense of timing. As I reached my car, I overheard them. They didn't see me standing near the hedge. Daniel's voice was sharp. "Why did you invite her?" Nora sighed. "I thought maybe if she came, she'd finally let it go." "Let it go?" He hissed. "You mean our guilt? Because I can't just pretend it didn't happen." "Then maybe you shouldn't have done it," she snapped. Their voices rose angry, raw, breaking through the perfect facade. Guests turned to look. Whispers began. And I realized in that moment, their secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. That was the last time I saw them together. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that they'd separated. Nora had moved back in with her mother. Daniel had taken a job out of state. I never reached out. Some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. But healing, that took time. At first, I thought forgiveness meant pretending it didn't hurt. But I learned it meant remembering and choosing peace anyway. It meant understanding that betrayal says more about them than it ever will about me. It meant building a new life where my worth wasn't measured by someone else's loyalty. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's not like waking up one day and realizing the pain is gone. It's more like learning how to breathe again, even when your chest still aches. In the weeks after Daniel and Nora's separation, I went through every phase of grief, denial, anger, sadness, and eventually, something resembling peace. But it wasn't easy. There were nights I'd lie awake, replaying everything: the way Daniel used to laugh, the way Nora used to hug me, the way their betrayal had shattered all of that in an instant. I missed the before version of my life when friendships were pure, when trust wasn't something I had to analyze like evidence in a courtroom. But slowly, new light began to creep into my life. It started with small things. One afternoon, I joined a community art class, something I'd always wanted to do, but never made time for. I remember sitting there, surrounded by strangers, staring at a blank canvas, thinking, this is me. A clean slate. The instructor, a kind woman named Lila, noticed how hesitant I was. She smiled and said, "Don't overthink it. Just paint what you feel." So I did. What came out was messy, a swirl of colors, sharp strokes, and uneven lines. But it felt real. It was chaos and beauty all at once, a reflection of everything inside me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel broken. I felt alive. About a year later, I ran into Nora at the farmer's market. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, and there was a heaviness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she saw me, she froze and then, to my surprise, she smiled. "Emma," she said quietly. I hesitated, but I didn't walk away. "Hi," I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. Finally, she broke the silence. "I've wanted to reach out so many times," she said, "but I didn't know if I should." "You shouldn't have," I said softly, "but I'm glad you're doing okay." She looked down, her voice trembling. "I'm not really. Daniel and I are over.
He's gone.
I'm just trying to rebuild." I studied her for a long moment. There was no anger in me anymore, just sadness. "I know what that feels like," I said. Her eyes welled up. "I'm so sorry, Emma. You didn't deserve any of it. Not from me. I wanted to hate her. I really did. But instead, I saw a woman who'd already punished herself far more than I ever could. I forgave you a long time ago," I said quietly. She looked at me shocked. "You did?" I nodded. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about freeing myself from it. A tear rolled down her cheek. "You're a better person than I ever was." I smiled faintly. Maybe I just learned the hard way. We parted ways after that. No dramatic goodbye, no promise to stay in touch, just two people who had finally laid a ghost to rest. Months later, I got a letter, handwritten, with no return address. It was from Daniel. I almost threw it away, but curiosity, or maybe closure, made me open it. His handwriting was the same as ever, neat, deliberate, almost too careful. He wrote, "Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve this letter to be read. But I need you to know I've spent every day since that night thinking about the person I became. I lost everything that mattered to me, and I earned that loss. I hope you found peace. You were always the best part of my life, not because of what happened, but because of who you were before it. Please don't let what I did change how you see love, or trust, or friendship. Some mistakes don't define who we are, they just remind us who we never want to be again. Daniel." I read it twice, and then I burned it. Not out of anger, but out of acceptance. I didn't need his words to heal me anymore. I didn't need closure from the person who broke me, because I'd already closed that chapter myself. 2 years later, I met someone new. His name was Michael, a quiet, thoughtful man who worked as a paramedic. We met through the same community program I volunteered with. He wasn't flashy or overly charming, but he was kind. When I told him about my past, about the betrayal that once shattered me, he didn't pity me. He just listened. And when he said, "You didn't deserve that," I believed him not because of the words, but because of how gently he said them. He taught me that love doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. It can be steady, peaceful, safe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on glass. Sometimes I still think about Daniel and Nora, not with anger, but with an odd sort of gratitude. If they hadn't broken me, I wouldn't have learned how to rebuild. If they hadn't betrayed my trust, I wouldn't have learned how to trust myself. Life has a strange way of giving you exactly what you need even when it hurts like hell. Because in the end, pain isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to shape you. And I've finally become someone I'm proud of. Epilogue, the letter I never sent. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about writing a letter to the past, to that younger version of me who stood frozen in a doorway, watching her world collapse. It would say, "Dear Emma, I know you're hurting. I know you feel like everything you believed in has turned to dust. But I promise you this is not the end. One day, you'll wake up and realize the pain doesn't own you anymore. You'll look in the mirror and see someone stronger, wiser, and softer all at once. You'll love again, laugh again, trust again. And when you do, it'll be real not because you forgot the pain, but because you grew beyond it. So cry tonight if you must. But remember tomorrow you rise." And I think that's what life really is, a series of rises after every fall.